for animals to suffer?
Generally speaking, no.
Generally speaking.
Unless I'm unaware of it.
Okay, so but would you pay for like this kind of thing to happen? For the sake of a glass of milk,
Let's go and get my coffee, yeah.
cheese, or a hamburger. Look, he's not even, the cow's not even dead yet. It's still twitching. This kind of thing happens countless times every day. How does that make you feel to see something like this?
Well, my friend, I'll tell you my honest opinion.
That's what we're here for. It's just honest opinion.
I'll tell you what.
Tell me what.
I'm a Hindu. Well, it's from India.
How you doing?
Hey, what's going on, John?
You're from India?
No, I'm not.
No.
No.
This is my father, yeah.
I'm not.
No, my
This is
father's
not my
Indian,
son.
my mother's American. Caucasian. So most Hindus are vegetarian by default. And you know, it's really something taken seriously that we're all alive, plants, animals, human beings, and to take another's life for our own, you know, generally speaking, is best to be avoided.
Yeah.
So the average Indian Hindu, they're very strict vegetarians. They don't eat animals ever.
They do drink a lot of milk because of Chai tea.
Yeah, so this is the thing. So there was a few years where I was, you know, strictly vegan because I said, well, you know, look, realistically speaking, looking at it, being a hypocrite, taking dairy and butter and cheese, etc.
That is
but
realistically
abstaining
speaking, yeah.
from meat.
Yeah.
But this was, you know, really kind of my upbringing.
Yeah.
And you know, but at some point I started eating dairy again because in Hindu diet it's just such a common, ubiquitous, like it's in everything.
We were just in India before the pandemic. We were in India until the pandemic started for 6 months, and we were trying to be as vegan as possible, and we were being offered chai tea nonstop.
Yeah,
Chai
sure.
tea, chai tea, chai tea.
Well, anyway, you know, it's one thing. A lot of it, like in India, the cow is like Gaia. The cow is Mother Earth. And I'm especially sensitive to this in Hindu nakshatra, or Hindu astrology, there's 30 nakshatras. And my sign is Pushami, which means nourishment, and its symbol is a baby calf and a cow, you know, is drinking milk.
Yeah.
So it's connected with moon and Cancer, or the sign of the mother. Anyway, for the Hindu, the cow is the mother.
Yeah.
So more often than not, where they get the milk, at least, is not as severe as like what you'd see in the West.
Sure.
But the fact of the matter is, yeah, as you know, being a
They
proud
still have
vegetarian,
to separate,
you can't help but see the hypocrisy. And be like, well,
Yeah.
honestly, like I eat milk because you know my family always did, but like I know it's fucking suffering that goes
I was
into
very
it.
surprised to learn that the leading exporter in the world is India
Interesting.
and Brazil. These two. They go
Uh-huh.
back and forth. So even though a lot of Indian people are not eating meat themselves, they have a huge excess.
Well,
of
definitely
cows
one
and
thing.
cows,
One
and they
thing
export
is
it
that
to China,
since Islam entered India,
Yeah.
they all eat cattle. They eat most meat. You know.
But the Hindus will sell their cattle to Muslim butchers.
Oh sure. No, I mean it
So
makes sense. It makes
it's
sense.
like, I believe that, you know, the ahimsa and this non-violence basis of Hinduism is really beautiful.
Sure.
But I think any religion, any civilization has a lot of hypocrisy in it.
Sure.
That's how it works, you know?
But you know, one thing I'd like to share is, you know, and this is something that comes, mind you, a very nuanced perspective on kind of vegan ethics, vegetarian ethics as a lifelong vegetarian. You know, I can't help but look and respect the fact that 90% of our human history, you know, it was pretty much evolutionarily speaking a necessity to eat meat. Like in Eskimo cultures or what have you, say Tibetan, it's very difficult to live on grain alone. And so I would say at its basis, the ethics on meat eating for me has been a necessity in life, more often than not, so therefore it's not unethical. However, from a spiritual perspective, the ideal is to do as little harm as humanly possible in life. And when you see, like I've got cows at home, they live there, we milk them, that's it, we don't kill them. You see them as a baby cow, you're like, this is a fucking living being. It's, wow, it's, you don't want to fucking torture it or kill it. I mean, in China, they'll fucking torture dogs to death while they're alive, and then they eat it, and they say, well, that makes the dog taste better. And you're like, wow, that's a fucking real detachment from life on planet Earth, because nobody likes to suffer, animals, plants, humans included. So it's a complex.
You know exactly what we're talking about. What I would say about the, you know, for 90% of our history we've been eating meat. this isn't necessarily true. I mean, so you've got cultures like the Inuit. Obviously, they were forced to.
Oh,
Sure,
I thought
sure.
it's
Then you've got people like the Hindus, which is an ancient, tens of thousands of years of civilization,
Sure,
who chose
sure.
not to eat meat. You've got people living in the Amazon, surviving largely off of fruit and insects.
And-
so what we've learned about humans is that
Sure.
we're flexible. That's why our species has been so successful.
Sure.
When we go beyond human history, when we were apes, we're still apes, but previously the ape diet, hundreds of, many millions of years, largely plant-based diet. So people like to justify their diets based on taking a tiny slice of evolution and saying, this is the definitive human diet, what we did 20,000 years ago. But what about a million years ago when we were living in the forest and eating fruit and insects?
Sure. Well, okay, so I'll say two things. Number one, from the Hindu culture, they say the last 5,000 years we've lived in what's called Kali Yuga,
Kali
or the
Yuga
era of
sucks, man.
hypocrisy and
We're-
ignorance.
We're definitely in Kali Yuga. We're
And
hardcore.
so they would argue, they would say that actually humans are originally vegetarian, and it's only in the advent of Kali Yuga that we've been eating animals.
Christians say the same thing. The Garden of
Uh-huh.
Eden, there was no meat in the Garden of Eden, as far as I'm aware.
So there's so many perspectives on it, but that's
What about our sorry,
Oh, please.
trying to get
Sure,
to
sure,
it,
sure,
but
sure.
What about our biological, canines? We have,
Yeah.
aspects in our biology that do meet with meat. So one thing is that is your whole argument about not killing at all,
No, my main
or is
argument.
it just about the capitalized system of
Good questions.
processed
So,
food and
first,
stuff like that? That's
Canine
fine.
teeth exist for breaking open the hard skin of a fruit. That's why if you look at a baboon, he's got the biggest canine teeth you've ever seen. Baboon's a vegetarian. Baboon's not eating meat. So those
Huh,
canine teeth have
interesting.
nothing to do with
yeah, they've got
with meat.
hardcore canines, baboons.
My main philosophy, I actually am not so concerned about killing, I'm concerned about freedom. So I strongly respect a hunter who goes into a forest, looks a deer in the eye, and decides to kill it.
Okay.
I think
So
that's
it's not
way
about
better
that.
than a person who goes to the supermarket, buys a piece of meat
Yeah.
that doesn't have a face, and they have no connection
Yeah,
to it.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think
don't think
definitely,
it's-
like I would say again, as a lifelong vegetarian, the ideal I was taught was always like vegetarian or vegan diets paramount. Most important, like meat is murder. That was the
Mm.
belief. But growing up, and just studying more human history, I'd say, well, there's a lot of cultures that always ate meat, and that was always kind of part of
Yeah.
it.
But then it's
Well,
the
one thing I
capitalism.
think we
No,
can
the
all agree
capitalist
on
meat industry,
is
that's what you're talking about.
like centralized,
course.
super duper intensified, like 10,000 chickens in one little structure. They can
Yeah.
only stand, and like they're beefed up to be so fat their legs break.
Yeah.
Versus like, oh, there's a chicken in the wild, and you fucking
Yeah.
blow dart it, and you fucking eat that shit.
It is
It's
a big
huge-
difference.
It's like a
It is a big
Holocaust
difference.
kind of meat eating, and there's like in nature, like the cow lives this
Yeah.
normal life, and then you take its life
Right.
at the end.
And that's
But it lived a life versus like a fucking warehouse where they
Yeah.
can't move. Their whole fucking existence is gross. That's real
and so
cruelty.
one of the main responses we get is we talk about this stuff to people and they say like, circle of life, bro. Or like, lion eats a gazelle, bro. It's
Sure.
like, well, your relationship with this chicken in a factory farm is not the same as the lion with the gazelle, because
Yeah.
the gazelle was free.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
that's a good.
and even a hunter who kills a deer, that deer lived its whole life as a deer, doing what a deer is supposed to do.
Mhm.
That for me is like the most important thing.
Yeah, sure. I totally agree with you there. I think that's something as someone who is lifelong vegetarian, and I was vegan for some years,
Yeah.
but then reverted back because Hindu diet's so dairy heavy. And again, like at home, we've got our own dairy cows, so it's like we're not taking milk from the store more often than not.
I would just add though that I think a major way to pretty much undercut and make things a lot to make it where it's a lot easier to get this accomplished, where
Yeah.
you're trying to take down this type of meat industry, you're gonna have to make organic and vegan food more affordable on a level
Yeah.
that basically outcompetes all the cheap prices. Because once you do that,
Yeah.
then you take away the complete power basis of this.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? When you make it more of an action of, it's the same thing with climate change. If
Yeah.
you can make it to where it's cheaper for me to take solar power than it is
Yeah.
a tank of gas, then you've really hit something, because as long as that money factor is there,
Yeah.
those guys are always going to try to remain in control. That's just how they play. And it's not that we have to be mean about it to figure out a way to get there.
Well, and that's
It's,
why
we have to figure out a way to actually get there in a smart
Incentivize
way.
it.
Yeah.
When Burger King starts offering Impossible Burgers, I hate Burger King, but I think that's a step in the right direction.
Sure.
The other thing though is we live in a very weird moment in history. all throughout human history, rich people, at least European history, rich people have eaten meat, and poor people have eaten like the potatoes they were growing.
Right.
in their-
So they live longer.
It's
suffering
only
lives.
now the quality of animal
Yeah.
products has been so reduced and incentivized by the government because they pay
Right.
subsidies so that all of the corn and soy that goes into factory farming
Right.
has a reduced price. That's the only reason McDonald's is cheaper than a stir fry.
Actually, in a hurry.
Because all
sorry.
these factors. The other thing is, if people just remembered how to cook their own food, then they wouldn't have to buy expensive pre-processed, veggie burgers and all this stuff.
Right.
Just make a stir fry with some rice and lentils.
Right, so education.
That's the cheapest way.
That's a good way. Yeah, that's a good way to show that. So if you should incentivize that and show that and be able to get that more of a voice,
Yeah.
people will do that more often, you see.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
when they make the cheaper option that way, you're always going to have an uphill battle. I'm just saying
Sure.
that like the best way to defeat the enemy is you know the enemy, you know how
Right.
they play. Therefore, if you take away their ability to play it,
Yeah.
they're not going to be able to say that message anymore.
You're very right. I also
I
think
think
it's a
it's the best
question
way.
of, like people often get like top-down. People tend to want a top-down approach. They tend to say we want government to change and we want corporations to change.
Right, but that's
so that
right.
individuals don't have to do anything.
Right.
But the politicians in Washington are never going to choose to be moral people. They're only ever forced.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take this call.
But we forget about individual responsibility. That's the factor that's been deleted from everyone's philosophy.
Sure.
We wait for politics. We wait for business leaders. Those
Yeah, I
people-
mean, whatever they do say is that's like the authorized thing to do, and it's okay, right? But
Yeah.
fun fact: these guys prescribe youth speed
Yeah.
amphetamines like on the daily, and they're like, "Well, it's okay, so
Right.
don't worry. There's a stone's throw away from fucking methamphetamine."
Yeah.
But people, as long as somebody else from the higher up says this is what you do, this is okay, they just fucking listen to that, and they don't think to themselves. There's always, a sign of a somewhat uninvolved person or just lazy, if you will.
That's like the key ingredient here is lazy, unconcerned morality,
Sure.
just inherited from previous generation.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that just real quickly, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so you know what you said, you used to be vegan.
Sure.
Because of your culture and family and stuff, you kind of went back.
Sure.
So, why did you originally go vegan?
Well, I mean, it was just because I got a deeper sense of in the dairy industry as well. There's a lot of animal cruelty, and they live
Right.
constrained lives and so on and so forth.
So you
So it was a natural extension of kind of vegetarian
compassion,
ethics.
kind of
That I was like,
compassion.
well, obviously vegan's really the ideal. But and obviously I can't help but say, in some sense, it's real kind of a hypocrisy having reverted back to vegetarianism, and being like, well, I don't eat
Right.
meat, but I do dairy. But at the same time, giving a long, hard look at we all die. There's an end to all of our lives. And so this is where, for me, the biggest question is are they given natural lives where they can enjoy themselves and live a life versus no, it's kind of a fucking hellhole their whole existence is. And there's billions of animals that live like that out of convenience.
But if we just go right back to the word vegan for a second.
Sure.
And if you just think about, in the dairy industry, for the enslaved cow, if it has a child,
Sure.
the child, if it's male, unfortunately to be male, well, I don't know which is unfortunate, female or male.
But male gets murdered, right?
Executed. So
Sure.
tell me, I don't know. Tell me if I'm not understanding this right. So if I purchase just a drop of milk, am I causing that suffering to that animal?
Sure. So I'm saying I'm in total agreement with you.
Are you
But
okay?
At the same time,
Are you okay with drinking that drop of milk?
Well, I am.
You are.
I actually am, and that's because historically speaking, in the Vedas, they say life in this material world is fed off of death or murder, and it's a hard fact in the material world. Everything eats everything. Again, this goes back to circle of life, and for me, it's just so obvious that animals is included in it. So for me, I say, well, plants.
Would
believe it or
you
not,
would you change position with the baby cow?
Sure. I mean, I think all of us, we have a death, and plants as well, they have life, and we cannot relate to plant life as well as we can animals. So it's easier for us to say, eat plants, not animals.
We are animals.
But so just one
Yeah,
point.
sure, we are animals, but you gotta understand, plants, they may very well be just as sentient as... So, this is true,
No.
but there's still,
Plants don't have a brain.
Mhm.
They don't have a nervous system.
Sure.
And it's been proven. that they do get a little bit of stimuli from
So
weather
riddle
and light.
me this,
I think
amigos.
plants are conscious.
Riddle me this: when a bear eats all the fish in the river, is that murder or is that life?
But a bear would never eat all the fish because the ecosystem evolved in balance.
Well, so that's what I'm saying. Humans are out of balance. We're destroying the planet, both plant and animal,
And
and
the
that's
be-
a big problem. And the fact of the matter is, ethically, if you're vegan, you preserve way more life. Because some people say, well, okay, plants are living too, and you say, well, you know what? If you eat animals, you eat 10 times the amount of fucking plants.
Trophic levels, exactly.
So it's still,
do
you know.
do you think putting a knife in an animal's throat and taking its leg is the same as snapping a carrot?
I do.
I think that's the same.
And I think we as
You
mammals,
don't
we find
though,
it
because
more
you're
relatable.
You've been vegan and a vegetarian. And
Sure.
So you
And so
clearly understand.
I believe there's a gray scale of ethics here.
Yeah.
And you know, like Manu, he's the lawgiver in India. He said, you know, that which is necessary to life is not unethical, but it is a great boon, karmically speaking, high virtue, merit, which gives access to heaven if you choose to abstain from eating meat. And that's Manu, who's like Moses of India, basically. So he said, you know, it's been a part of life for eons, but at the same time, those who give it up out of kindness and saying everything wants to live a life and not suffer, it's a real virtue which gives you access to enlightenment or God. So that's Manu's words, not mine.
So choosing compassion.
Yeah, sure. And I'm saying there's a gray scale there, but the maximum is definitely veganism.
It's
And
definitely
so
gray
I
scale.
admit I'm a hypocrite by being vegan for several years and going back to vegetarianism, but I say in the gray scale,
Okay.
it's more ethical than eating, you know, meat and dairy and everything. And it's less
definitely is.
ethical than being vegan.
The one thing I think is interesting though is that you're arguing for like a natural diet, right? You're saying humans have been doing this for so long, but dairy is, as far as I can see, like the least natural thing there is. Drinking milk when you're no longer a baby, there's no other mammal. Every mammal produces milk, and it's only consumed by babies.
Sure.
Humans are the only ones who decide to remain babies into adulthood by suckling from a teat. That strikes me as really unnatural.
Sure.
We've been eating plants for hundreds of thousands of years longer than we've been drinking milk. Milk is only like the last 10,000 years with the agricultural revolution.
Sure.
It was only developed by a few cultures in the Fertile Crescent, you know. Nobody was drinking milk in the New World. The Native Americans were not drinking milk. The Africans were not drinking milk until the migration of the cattle industry.
Sure.
But so I think dairy consumption is like the least natural of any animal product.
Right. Anyway, I'm gonna go hang out with my amigo. It's good,
Thanks for
good
talking
talking,
to me.
guys.
Thanks for being
It's always
open-minded
great
stuff,
to,
man.
you know, exchange ideas and
That's what it's
feelings and
about.
ethics.
Enjoy
Ethics
the
is
fresh air.
paramount in life. You know, when you're at the pearly gates, is compassion first and nothing else. So, you know, there you go. Namaste, amigos.
Wow, that was a long conversation.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just come out of the way while the. Oh, hey, Candy. Hey, Trey.
I just make up most of the stuff I say.